One of the NFL's largest players and most freakish athletes is right here from the Bay Area. He grew up just 6 miles from Levi Stadium. And yes, Vita Vea does want a trade from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, maybe to the 49ers. According to The Athletic's Ted Nguyen, Vea wants to be traded to a California team, and there are only 3 options: the Rams, the Chargers, and the Niners, or the Raiders. And yes, the 49ers should be interested. He rampaged through high school football in Milpitas, which is 6 miles away from Levi Stadium. When I take BART down from the city here, San Francisco, to Levi Stadium, sometimes I don't like the drive, I get off at Milpitas and I think of Vita Vea, who would fit with any team. A lot of people say, well, the 49ers have an attacking 4-man front. Well, A, things are transitioning under Raheem Morris, and B, Vita Vea has been second in the entire NFL behind only Dexter Lawrence in pressures over the past 3 years with 62 pressures. He does that at the same time that he's a massive run-clogging fire hydrant at about 350 pounds. So very Bay Area themed discussion here as we pan over towards sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge. Vita Vea played running back in high school at Milpitas. Running back, yes. And he was dominant, as you would expect against high schoolers. A man amongst boys. Now, we talk about defensive tackle trades. Dexter Lawrence, the only player with more pressures from the defensive tackle position, that nose tackle position, than Vita Vea over the course of the past 3 seasons. He just was traded from the New York Giants to the Bengals for the number 10 overall pick. Now, Lawrence, though, was a couple years younger than Vita Vea. He was 28 years old at the time of the trade. Vita Vea is going to be 31 years old. Lawrence also had more time left on his contract, theoretically making him more expensive. My prediction is this. I think that Tampa Bay is not going to be able to trade him here in training camp. He's got 1 year left on his deal, $17 million per year. Premium defensive tackles like Vita Vea are commanding well over $20 million per year. If the Bucs don't want to pay him, I think they're going to hold out for a first or second round pick, but probably a first round pick that probably won't be satisfied here over the course of training camp. I don't think the 49ers would want to give away that premium of a pick in what is lining up to be a premium 2027 NFL draft, because you would have to pay Vita Vea $20 million on top of that. However, as time passes and we get closer to the NFL trade deadline, this is the type of move that the 49ers might really be tempted to make, either as a rental for the rest of 2027, or if they have a look at Alfred Collins, CJ West, obviously Osa Odighizuwa, and they say, well, we want to toss in a dominant dual-purpose defensive tackle into that mix to push us over the top into Super Bowl contention. Could be a trade that the 49ers are eventually really motivated to make ahead of the trade deadline, especially if Vita Vea would love to play for the team that is now based, 6 miles away from his high school. 49ers played at Candlestick back in the day when Vita Vea was playing high school ball here in the Bay Area, but now his family very, very near Levi's Stadium. So the intrigue only grows, but yet this is a guy that you're not going to say no to on your football team. It is a matter of price, and the 49ers have so much salary cap space earmarked for Brock Purdy and other players in future seasons, so they've got to be careful with the finances, and they've got to be careful with those 2027 draft picks. But some fits might just be too good to be true. I spoke on 95.7 The Game about not just this, but everything that's happened so far in 49ers training camp. So go ahead and enjoy.
Hey, David, how you been, man? What's going on?
Good. I forgot my glasses today, so it was really bright. Thankfully, I didn't have a concussion to deal with. But, yeah, Kyle's been out there for 2 days, and I'm guessing that his limit time-wise is because it is really bright. There's not a cloud in the sky in July in Santa Clara. So often coming off a concussion, if you're still feeling those symptoms, then you have to stay indoors in a darker environment. But he's been able to be out there for like 20 to 30 minutes per day.
David, will you share with the audience the process of something like this? I have no idea when you started to get a little bit of info. I've been a little surprised that people, I get it if you're curious, that's totally normal, but if you're like angry that you didn't get to know earlier, that kind of escapes me. But can you share with people what happened here for you and as a journalist, kind of how you handle something like this?
Well, a few days before the announcement, I started to gather that there might be something pertaining to Kyle Shanahan that might limit his availability for the start of training camp, but there was never anything that I was able to glean that was confirmed. So there was nothing to report. You know, you don't just take every single rumor or slight piece of information. I think Tim Kawakami said that he had 15% of the story. You don't take 15% of a story and put it out there if you're a responsible reporter. Now, I know that in this age of clickbait, people will take 15% and fill in the remaining 85% and put out basically a fake report, and they don't care if it's accurate. They just care that they were first. So maybe that standard or that lowering of standards has created a lowering of expectation for some people. But the truth of the matter in this instance is that Kyle Shanahan nearly lost his eye. Like Chris Sims, his best friend, went on the podcast today and said that Shanahan was very close to losing his eye. And this was a traumatizing situation for both Kyle and for his family. The police have come out and said that there was no criminal activity here. Alcohol or drugs were not involved, which, you know, you put all those things together, that makes this a private matter. And nobody has to disclose it until it becomes something that affects the professional football team. And the 49ers did disclose it the day before training camp started. So I don't think anybody missed anything here. I don't think that anything was put on public record because, again, there was no criminal investigation. Alcohol or drugs were not involved. And I think that, you know, any reasonable, normal person would recognize that Kyle Shanahan is a human being. He's got a family, and that this was a traumatic event, and no one is entitled to information sooner than it naturally became available in this case.
No one's entitled to it, David, and you went to Stanford, and based on where I think that this happened, it happened right by Stanford University. Are you surprised that, considering it happened at 6 o'clock in the evening, are you surprised that there aren't other details or eyewitnesses who would have said initially, within the first 11 days, what had happened and who was involved?
Yeah, I think that is mildly surprising, right? But it could have just been luck of circumstance that nobody recognized Kyle Shanahan. Not everybody in the Bay Area is a football fan, especially in Palo Alto. That area, the Stanford football team, they had some great teams when I was there that struggled to sell off, and inventing new prime numbers and doing much more important stuff than playing football, right? They were working on cures for cancer and stuff in that Stanford area. I don't know what the situation was. I saw that the accident happened in Palo Alto. If there had been somebody who recognized that Kyle Shanahan was in an accident and had taken it to social media, obviously the world would have known much sooner. But that didn't happen. And instead, the world found out, 11 or 12 days after. And guess what? Nobody's life changed on the outside. And I would say that this was good for Kyle Shanahan and his family because they had to deal with that trauma. They're probably still dealing with that trauma. The last thing that I think they wanted was that and all this rampant speculation to get out in the media, just knowing how irresponsible social media can be. And I think we also need to think about the other person in this accident. And that's nobody is talking about, but nobody goes out, wants to get into a car accident. And it's going to be, based on the details that we've heard, probably traumatizing for both parties.
How's De'Zhaun Stribling look so far?
He's looked really good. He's tall, right? He's 6'3", so he's got those long limbs, which you always want to see in a wide receiver, especially somebody who, I think in the future, the 49ers would love to see him play that X receiver position. Mike Evans has also looked awesome, though, so that's his job for the time being. But Stribling, the 49ers have this setup where so they need a bigger slot receiver because they love running the big slot and the small slot. Christian Kirk is probably going to be that small slot. But Stribling can play that big slot. But the way I see the way he runs routes, the length, I saw the physicality on tape in college. He can block. I think he has all the makings of an X-wide receiver over the course of the long haul in a 49ers uniform. But he's caught everything thrown his way. He dropped only one pass at Ole Miss last year, so we know that he's got really good hands. And I just think he's a high floor guy, and I think this is a theme of the 49ers draft class. And this could be a good kind of comparative advantage to glean out of the draft in the new NIL era. You have a lot of players who played at several different schools who are transferring between schools who are, vying for bigger contracts, essentially mini professionals, right? So somebody like De'Zhaun Stribling played at Washington State, he played at Oklahoma State, and then he played at Ole Miss. That means he's had to learn 3 different systems, and all 3 of those offenses used them in a different way. So, at Ole Miss, it was screen passes and goal balls, and at Oklahoma State, it was a lot of intermediate routes. The 49ers gotten a guy who they feel is going to be more of a, I can't say finished product, but more of a complete product early on than receivers that you might have drafted 5 or 6 years ago, just because he's been through so much and so many different systems in college. And I think that they're going to really reap the benefits of that here over the next few months.
Do you think that they're going to change the scheme a little bit this year and go to more 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers? It seems to me with with George Kittle going to be trying to work his way into the season and the wide receiver room they have, do you think that that's going to be a shift that Kyle makes?
Well, they didn't have the receiver health necessary to do that a lot over the past 2 seasons. And in 2023, when they had that loaded offense, it was a different type of receiver room. Deebo Samuel was one of the headliners, and he definitely wasn't a prototypical wide receiver. He's a great player. He's Deebo Samuel, but just wasn't what you would normally think of in terms of a standard separator at the Z receiver position. So now that they've restocked that room and they've invested so much in it over the offseason, I could definitely see that happening. And that's irrespective of George Kittle's availability. I think that you've got Mike Evans. He plays the X, split end, prototypical body there, a future Hall of Famer. It doesn't get any better schematically than Mike Evans at the X position. Ricky Pearsall is a pure Z flanker receiver who's going to really benefit from coming in motion. Just a smooth route runner. And then we go to the big slot position with De'Zhaun Stribling. You could pair that with a single tight end set with George Kittle, and you got really, really good blockers out there, right? You've got Evans at the X, you've got Kittle at tight end, and you got Stribling at the F at the big slot. Even though that's a very, very threatening pass formation, right, with 3 wide receivers and a tight end who can go on and catch the ball, that is also something that you could run out of with lethal efficiency. So that's what Kyle Shanahan is going to be going for. And I think that you're onto something. I think you're going to see a lot of these guys on the field at the same time.
David, how do you handicap the running back race behind Christian McCaffrey between Jordan James and Kalen Black?
I think that Jordan James has been in the system for a year. That gives him the early leg up. So obviously Christian McCaffrey's at the top of the list there. Then it's who's going to be that running back too. And, then the question beyond that is, how often does the running back 2 see the field to give Christian McCaffrey a breather? And I think the limiting factor there in the past had been that they didn't really trust anyone nearly as much as Christian McCaffrey to run the right routes and to keep the pass game humming. So if both James and Kalen Black can earn Shanahan's trust in that regard, I think that they'll be able to spell Christian McCaffrey more than the second running back has in the past. Now, Black has looked like he's got some juice. He really does. It's going to come down to him learning the route tree and establishing himself as a pass protector at the NFL level, because it's all about trust, right? You can't yank Christian McCaffrey off the field have somebody come in and blow up a play, maybe even blow up the season, given how competitive this NFC West race is going to be. So you really have to trust who you're going to put there instead. That's why Jordan James currently has the leg up, and that's the ground that Kalen Black is going to have to try to make up here over the course of training camp in the preseason.
Impossible to really gauge defensive players when, you haven't padded up yet and you're not really getting after other teams. But just Nick Bosa in his movement, how does he look to you as he tries to come back from another ACL injury?
So I stepped out on the field yesterday, and I was absolutely floored because Bosa was right in front of me, and it does not look like he tore his ACL. Especially does not look like he tore his third ACL in his football career. He was. I said this to myself, and I said this to somebody who was standing right next to me on the field. I thought that he looked in better shape than he did entering last season before the ACL. I said that before Trent Williams did the same exact thing after practice. So I think that many people who have been around Nick Bosa are thinking the same thing. He looks in phenomenal shape. And I don't know why I was surprised. I guess I figured, okay, well, if this is the third time that it's happened, it's going to take longer to recover. But I think that Nick Bosa has taken lessons from, I'm sure he's got a whole notebook, from his previous ACL tears. I'm sure he's taken and applied lessons of rehab and recovery. And the first really good news of 49ers training camp was that he wasn't on that PUP list. And to me, that was mildly surprising because normally they've played it safe in these situations. When I saw him the next day, I understood why he wasn't on the PUP list. And it's because he looks completely physically ready to go.
David Lombardi, SF Standard. I think we're already starting to hear this defense is threatening to look a lot different under Raheem Morris. How would you sort of describe what you're seeing?
I'll tell you what I noticed on the fifth play on the first day, and it was right in front of me. Christian McCaffrey split out into the flat on a pass pattern, and who was covering him? Romello Height was covering Christian McCaffrey in the flat. It didn't go well for Romello Height, but it doesn't usually go well for anybody trying to cover Christian McCaffrey. That's why he's been a cheat code for 10 years now. But it just gives you a little bit of a glimpse into some of these five-man fronts, which are based in a 3-4 concept, which means that edge rushers are going to be dropping back into coverage a little bit more often. People have raised concerns about Romello Height's weight or lack thereof. He's about 240, but that's very, very intentional. He's a defensive end who has 3-4 outside linebacker flex capability. He dropped into coverage at Texas Tech. He turned on the tape, and the third play, he's breaking up a pass at Texas Tech. Now, the reason that you do that is not to have Romello Height covering players like Christian McCaffrey on a regular basis. The reason that you do that is that you muddy up the vision for the opposing quarterback and for the opposing offensive lineman. So a five-man front is going to fit the run differently, and I think the 49ers' own run game has had a wrench thrown into it by five-man fronts, which have been adopted by most of the league at this point. But B, in terms of the pass game and rushing the quarterback, and we know the 49ers only had 20 sacks last year, which was the least in the league, you can really throw an offense into a blender if you start rushing less predictably. And I think that's the main point here. I think most of the time we're going to see Romello Height roaring around the edge. We've heard the D Ford comparisons. He's got tremendous burst. He's going to be opposite Nick Bosa. They'll be rushing with 4. I think most of the time we will see that, but I do think that the 49ers will have tricks in their repertoire to mix things up to make those standard 4-man rushes all the more effective because offenses will just have to think about so much more now that Raheem Morris has incorporated it.
How much does Osa Odighizuwa make all of that possible? In other words, his presence in the interior of the defensive line, how much does that help something like the things you're describing?
Well, that's a great question because I think it was the biggest weakness of this team last year. Obviously, when they lost Bosa, they went from, I thought, Super Bowl favorites. They beat Seattle on the road in week 1, and Bosa sealed the game. But I thought the loss of Bosa last year turned the 49ers from Super Bowl favorites to a fringe, long-shot team. And they almost, pulled off a huge miracle. They still won 13 games. But that was crazy to me because they lost the edge rush with Bosa. The thing about that team, though, last year is that even with Bosa, they were still suspect at best, and that's a nice word. They weren't good rushing from the interior. They were relying a lot on somebody like Yetur Gross-Matos, who had injury issues of his own. He was really a defensive end who flexed down to defensive tackle. They did not have a natural pass-rushing defensive tackle. That's why they paid Javon Hargrave all that money heading into the 2023 season. But he got hurt. That didn't work out. So that's been a big glaring gap in this defense. They need that quality interior rusher, and that's who Osa Odighizuwa is. So I think it opens up a lot for this defense, man. It becomes especially lethal once you pair him with Nick Bosa, because Bosa is the guy that commands a lot of attention on the outside. Now you have somebody who commands a ton of attention on the inside, who has a high win rate on the inside, and you can start talking about winning as a pocket collapsing line, not just winning in one spot of the defensive line. With all the mobile quarterbacks that we have in this league now, if you're only winning on one spot, that quarterback can run away. But if you're rushing in cohesion, and that typically takes at least 1+ DT and 1+ defensive end, then all of a sudden you can start collapsing the pocket effectively.
David, real quick, with this trade request from Vita Vea to the Tampa Bay Bucks, while we're talking defensive tackle, any chance the 49ers get in on that conversation?
Well, he's 30 years old, so I don't think that he would cost as much as he did a few years ago. That being said, he's a premium player, so it probably won't be cheap. Vita Vea went to high school in Milpitas, 6 miles from Levi Stadium. So I don't know if he grew up a 49ers fan, but I did see, I think Ted Nguyen, who writes for The Athletic,
there's
a source that says that Vita Vea wants to play in California or for the Raiders. And so he wants to be close to family, I think is the translation there. Well, you can't be any closer to family than 6 miles from where you grew up. I think he's the biggest dude in the NFL, right? He weighs 350 plus. Vita Vea is special because normally guys who are 350 plus are just fire hydrants who take up blockers and are good run defenders, but he can also rush the passer. So he is a unicorn in that regard. So, if I'm an executive in the league, I'm happy to get into a bidding war for this guy because he is such a unique talent, even if he is 30 years old. And if a lot of executives are thinking that way, then it's probably going to be really hard to get him. But I also think it wouldn't be very smart of Tampa Bay to not figure out a way to re-sign him because he's been durable as well over the course of his career. But hey, you can always dream if you're the 49ers, right? I think you'd pair really nicely there as a big DT next to Osa Odighizuwa, who's a smaller defensive tackle. He's like 290. Vita Vea is like 360. So got extra 60 or 70 pounds with this guy. He's massive.
David, great stuff, and thank you for your flexibility. Really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, no problem. It was great talking to you guys. Hope to see you around.
Absolutely, we will. David.